Hello, everybody. We are live. Welcome to the Juju Show number 8. I've got a couple of regulars here with us this week. Hello, Antonio. How you doing?
Hello, Antonio from Juju Ecosystem.
James, welcome back.
Howdy, James Beatty from Creative Drive.
Cool. Well, we have a run-through of stuff to talk about today. We're just back from a Juju team sprint last week in New Orleans. So we spent last week working together. Now I got to hang out with Antonio and work on moving some of the projects that we're all working on forward and showing off some cool stuff. But let's start this week off with community news. And the big news of the week is that Juju 2.1.1, so our first point release on Juju 2.1 has gone out. And the two big things I wanted to call out from this release is that containers will now respect the default routes in MAAS. So if you're using MAAS and you're defining default routes that need to get passed to the provision machines, Juju will actually help make sure that those same routes get put onto containers on those machines so that your networking view is consistent and it lets you keep using your containers for your density story. So, legacy users on MAAS, rejoice. Go get your 2.1.1. You're going to love it. And then conjure-up spells support side loading of bundles, which is a kind of handy way for folks to play with those spells in a bit more custom format. So I encourage you guys to go hit the link in the show notes for the list of the full release notes. But I think those two are definitely worth calling out. Everyone get your stuff updated to 2.1.1.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Awesome.
When's that controller going to pop off?
Yeah, so soon. I know I saw stuff got updated to 2.1, and what we're not sure was just the infrastructure on hosted Juju, and the models that are running will come next, or if it all got switched yet. I should go look at my my running models and see what version they're sitting at. The other thing that kind of came along with this that I wanted to highlight was that there was a great email post around the Juju snap changes. Juju can now be delivered as a classic snap for those of you who are interested in playing with Snappy. There's a few things that, really make this kind of useful. And I know some folks were questioning, they didn't quite understand, because in classic mode, the snaps do get permission and access to things that they wouldn't have in confined mode. So it's not like the full security story of, having your software as locked down as you could possibly make it. But it has some real nice advantages as far as they're still contained. So all of your files and everything don't spread across the whole file system, but they're in that snap directory for that snap that you've installed, in this case, Juju. And you can install, I know I've snap installed different versions. And so if you're someone who plays with different versions of things or wants to try it out and be able to go back nicely and easily, checking out Juju as a snap makes a lot of sense. And I've got a link in the show notes. John Meinel had a really great reply in that thread around the kind of full advantages of using the snap, even in classic mode, what that gets us. So I encourage folks that are curious about snaps and why you would use them, and particularly those that have said, oh, that security model of doesn't work for me because my application needs to talk to or write to or do something that you would think wouldn't be allowed. Looking at what the classic mode gets you is still worth the look. So I encourage you to check out whether or not your applications would be greatly delivered as a snap. Much easier release process. And for Juju, I think it's going to be great for us to encourage users to head that route more, where we can put out rolling updates more frequently, more easily, and keep getting users the best Juju that we've got available for them. You guys tried using Juju from a snap yet?
Yeah, it's great. I ran into a few issues installing the snap on containers, but
nested containers that should work. I'll talk a little bit later. Snap in containers is something that's been actively worked on and that they've had working. And then as they find issues that come up with different pieces of software, they end up having to update it. I'll talk a little bit about my playing with Prometheus, and like as of today, you can't deploy Prometheus, which is delivered as a snap, into a container. But there's a bug on that's tracked and it's fixed committed, and in the next snapd release that should go out and get better. So it's definitely a very quickly moving train right now for sure.
Totally.
All right. Next up, Juju 2.2 is coming. I think we should see the first alpha coming along any day now. But with that is coming a change for folks to kind of get a heads up on. And the way Juju login is going to change. Originally, Juju login was kind of focused on that. I log in as a user on a controller, and if I want to switch from one user to another, I can log in as different users. Hey, Chuck. Joining us here is Chuck Butler. Oh, here comes Matt too. All kinds of happy folks. But what we're actually going to change in 2.2 is with everyone getting multiple controllers and with Jazz, which we talked about last week, the biggest thing we need login to be able to do is to help you switch more easily from controller to controller, where you have different login authentication systems for that. So there's a post about kind of the summary of the change. It shouldn't affect users unless you are doing login changes within different users on the same controller, which, to be honest, if you had a user account on that controller, you'd probably just use that one. But feel free to, grab the thread. The link will be in the show notes, and bring up any questions or concerns you've got, and just be on a lookout if you've got scripts or things that are automating that in Juju 2. When we get to 2.2, you want to be aware of that behavior change coming down the pipe. Hey, did you guys want to say hi, Chuck and Matt?
Certainly. Hi, my name is Charles Butler. I work on the Kubernetes team.
And I'm Matt Bruzek. I also work on the Kubernetes team. So
awesome.
We're here.
Next community news thing, I wanted to highlight a new community charm, which made it up through promulgation. I believe it's a Giraph charm, which is something for doing, it is a big data tool for doing visual charts around things. And there's 2 links in here. One of them is for the actual announcement, but there was another one where then someone was trying to figure out how to, use it in a big data scenario for some demo stuff. And some of the use cases that it can be put to were really interesting as far as doing a lot of shortest path and page rake type visualization stuff. So if you're looking for that kind of work in your big data stack, make sure to check out. You have this new tool available to you in the charms, and like everything else, you deploy it, relate it up, pipe your existing big data over that way, and really use it. Elasticist Charms, what is this? Charmscaler made it too. Charmscaler.
Yeah, so
Autoscaler for Juju applications. What? Tell me more.
Exactly. So this is some awesome work by our partners over at Elasticist. I had the pleasure of doing the final review on this. Simon Caleby is the primary charm author behind this. So the idea is that you can set some metrics up. Let's say, for example, that you have a very compute-intensive workload, and it would be nice if you could horizontally scale because you know that workload is going to spike during certain times of the month. So you can attach this Elasticist charm scaler, set some very basic rules, and then whenever you meet that criteria, it automatically adds a unit, enters a cooldown state while the unit is currently turning up. It'll join in because Juju is amazing at what it does. It'll just join the work pool, compute, do the number crunching that it has to do, and then whenever it's done and you're still in this, you're outside of the cooldown phase and it realizes that you're no longer exceeding that CPU gate, it will remove a unit and turn another cooldown state. So it keeps you running only the number of instances that you need. It's a fantastic way to, I've actually been toying with this in Kubernetes workers by scheduling like Boink, which is just a number crunching image, and then running that and watching it scale the worker farms out, which is pretty cool.
Wow. That is slick and useful, and actually will tie into my demo here a little bit pretty well. We should talk some more. I think we might be able to put some of this stuff to use at some point. Well, that's really cool. Thanks for bringing that up. I'll add that link into the show notes, the Charmscaler. I had seen that there was some work going on that, but I hadn't realized that it got into promulgation.
This was a world first, Rick. Like, you got to break the news first. I haven't even mailed the list about it. This literally just happened like 20 minutes ago. So
see, there you go. Live Juju show for the win there. Awesome. Well, thank you all. Appreciate the add-on there. All right. Next up, we have a question from the community who emailed in, and I'm gonna make this person go and actually email the list as well, but we can talk about it a little bit here and kind of go back and forth. So the question: when deploying services such as OpenStack charms that require SSL keys and certs, they are defined in the configuration of the charm, usually some base 64 thing. However, having keys floating around in Juju and come up when you do a Juju config charm means it's a bit harder to keep the keys safe and to track and audit who accesses them. Are there any plans to move towards an approach where such sensitive files use charm resources to just dump a payload when deploying? So that's an interesting problem, and I know that's something that we've actually chased in many different formats for a while. And I'm really happy that the Kubernetes guys are showing up here, because I feel like this is something that they had and solved with their easy RSA charm. Do you guys want to talk about how you're leveraging easy RSA to distribute certs within your Kubernetes deploy?
Sure. Yep. So we for Kubernetes, they recommended using the easy RSA package. So what we've been doing is we set up easy RSA on one of our servers, and I wrote a charm that does the self-signed certificate, and then it waits for certificate signing requests from the other charms. So via the relations, you can relate to this charm, and you can get you submit a self-signed or a certificate signing request through the relation, and it would sign it and then return that back to you, both a certificate and a key. And that's how we're doing Kubernetes today with the easy RSA charm, and that's how we're scaling it up. So if you scale up, more charms or more units get added. More units go to the easy RSA charm and ask for certificates, and they get them. So,
is there anything in the easy RSA charm where I could supply my own keys that I want to have distributed if I've got something else building keys within my network and I want to send them out, or is that not something that it does yet, or doesn't do?
Not yet. That was something I couldn't get working. So easy RSA likes to self-sign certificates. I'm sure we could get something like that working. We don't have the ability to set a certificate at this time. So
that sounds like a great place for someone to kind of help join and build on top of the current easy RSA charm. Right. I know another thing that some folks had been looking at trying to charm up. Now, I'm not aware of how that went or where that's at, but Vault is kind of become an interesting tool for managing certificates across the deploy. Mm-hmm. And I've seen some folks that were playing with using Vault in order to distribute things within an OpenStack environment. Particularly, I think they were looking at it for Ceph can be set up to have keys while the data is at rest, where it basically needs to track the keys for the various Ceph nodes. And I believe they were using Vault for that. Now, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so somebody was working on a Vault charm, and we were talking about that as in relation to the easy RSA charm. And somebody else was also looking at Let's Encrypt and trying to charm up that. So those are a couple of different technologies to do this, the certificate signing. But I am not aware that either of them made it all the way to charm or not. But we talked about that as far as the relations are concerned, because I wanted to make a pretty generic relation that we could have a different back end. And that's again, the power of Juju is you can take that component out and replace it with another one that your particular one that you're using, whether it be Vault or Let's Encrypt or something like that. Yep.
Yeah, cool. Go ahead.
I saw something interesting fly across IRC the other day. Someone was sharing their HA proxy config, and I swooped that up, and it had these interesting include base 64 stanzas in it. And I thought, I just had never seen those in YAML before. And I thought it was really interesting because that actually allowed me to take all of my base 64 strings out of my bundle files and just reference them relative to the bundle using that include base 64 stanza. So for people who are just looking for a simple way to get that big fat string that they don't want to be passing around their YAML files out of it, I thought that was a really interesting way.
Now, so to be clear on that, and I just ran into that, someone was asking about that today in IRC, and that's not part of the native bundle deploy. It was actually extra code put on top of the deployer, I believe, that will actually then load those files in base 64 for you as the YAML file goes through.
Oh,
so
I didn't think that was standard YAML.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, exactly. But what's really good is that's awesome feedback that it's something that we should look at including in the bundle format stuff as it moves forward and having that become baked in. Because again, like you say, it's darn handy to be able to keep your certs kind of outside in a different repo or whatnot, and then referencing them via, in this case, a path or whatnot. I also think there's perfectly something to having it be charms that accept resources. such that if you have a central place to manage your certs where you could basically, upload via supplying a resource, a directory of certs or whatnot that it needs to be aware of, and be able to hand them out over relation. I like that in the sense that I really like certs as relation data, particularly because it helps with things like rolling certs, where basically if one of them wants to go through and update it, you don't have to re-upload resources or whatnot, but through the relation data, they can actually do things like alert everyone across the relation that, hey, new ones are coming, here's the new one, or where to get it and all that. So there's definitely a few ways to crack the nut, I guess. What I wanted to kind of suggest is that the person asked a question, and I'm sorry, of course I don't write down the user's name who actually emailed me the question. Sandor, that's who it was. Sandor should definitely email the list, and I think it'd be good to chat around where we are with different charms that can provide that kind of solution. But there's definitely more than one way to go at it. So, alrighty. And the last kind of community question, I keep getting feedback that the Juju Show should go weekly, go shorter and weekly. What do y'all think?
I think a lightning talk-based format would be interesting, as far as, at least when I'm looking on YouTube videos. I like to see, short 5-minute content that I can get something easily in and out of. But I also like the Q&A on it too. So.
Yeah, a little between the lines or something.
Yeah,
it's an idea. All right, I'm gonna chew on this and try to figure out what we can do. And I definitely agree. We try to get shorter and shorter here. I know we started out like an hour on our first ones, and we've definitely cut down from that. We want to keep doing some cutting, but at the same time, I appreciate the feedback that folks are wanting, more news, more material, more often, and we will definitely see what we can do to make that happen.
It's good that folks are asking for it. It's good.
Yeah. All right. So, demo time. I've been talking for a little bit about Juju and operating Juju and running Juju in production. And what I wanted to show is kind of where I'm at with some work I've been working on. So I'm going to do some screen sharing voodoo here. Let's start with over here. I want to do an application window, that one. All right, so can you guys see I've got my controller here. I've got my controller called Stress. I'll show you why it's called Stress in a minute. And can you guys see the text okay? Yeah. Size all right and everything? All right. So I've got a few models in here. I just bootstrapped this. So I'm going to run this controller. I'm going to pretend that this is going to be run in production, and then I'm going to use it over a great length of time. So if you look at, if I switch to my controller model, or actually let's do show controller. And you can see here I've got my controller, and I've got it running at HA. So I've got 3 different controller nodes here. So this was great. I can now start to, I've added models and use this, but now I need to, figure out how am I going to actually make sure that my controllers stay up and what the status and things are. And so using the stuff we've talked about, where Andrew had added some Prometheus data out of those controllers that can be exposed and picked up, I've gone ahead and set this up. So what I've got to share is this. So this is a deploy of Grafana, which is a way to visualize the data. Prometheus, which will collect the data that the controllers spit out. Telegraph is a really handy thing. Everyone ever used Munin before or other stuff to kind of get system information out of your machines? Telegraph does the same thing. So Juju will spit out information about the number of models and users and machines and all the Juju-specific info out. But Telegraph will spit out machine-level info like RAM usage, CPU usage, disk usage, and that kind of basic hardware info. And then Ubuntu, I used Ubuntu because Telegraph is a subordinate charm. It's meant to kind of tack on to things that are already running because, you got a machine because you deployed an application. Now you want to monitor that machine. So I use the Ubuntu charm as just something to hang off of because I don't have a way to do subordinates on machines today in Juju. So I deploy that onto machines 1 and 2. And my Grafana and my Prometheus, my data collection stuff's running on machine 0 here. All right, so what does this actually look like? So what I'm going to do is switch over to my browser. This one. And what it looks like is this. So here is a machine, 10.0.0.8, and it's spitting out these metrics. This is a format that Prometheus knows how to take. Okay, so this is showing me CPU usage and all that. Here's machine 10.0 to 0.9. And what that leads to is you can grab this Prometheus. This is deployed via Prometheus Charm onto the controller. Now, obviously, if you're monitoring something and sticking monitoring tools onto the thing you're watching, it's going to affect the data a little bit. But here you can see I'm running a query about how much memory is free, and I execute it, and you'll see 3 lines. This is showing me how much free memory is on each of my 3 controller nodes. And if I go to the console thing here, this is the query that gets executed against it. So you can see one of these is on the Prometheus instance, one of them's on Ubuntu 1 and Ubuntu 0. These are the what it was related to, right? So it's reporting the data instead of as IP address or whatnot. It's reporting it as which application it's tied to and watching. And you can see, scroll. There's a lot of data you can watch. So this is useful, and I can go through here and I can find different data that I want to look at. So let's look at how much disk is used, and notice it looks on each disk available, so /dev/sys or whatever, and then you get a lovely busy chart of all the disk usage, and it's a little bit hairy and crazy. So the next thing I did is I go through, okay, well, let's put Grafana on here, and let's actually build a dashboard of interesting information that's very useful to track for Juju. Now, what I've done is set up kind of a reusable dashboard so far. It tracks the number of models, so you can see that I started out when I bootstrapped it to the controller and the default model, and then I added 3 more, and I can see when I added them. The number of machines, so here you can see where I enabled HA. I went from 1 machine to 3 machines because I added 2 more for my HA status. You can see how much free memory over time. So this was my first controller, and then my 2 other ones as they kind of work along. You know, CPU usage, system load. I just have it at the 5-minute marker here, and then a very important one, right? How much disk is used, or maybe is free on your machines. You can kind of change this up. So Mongo, which backs the storage of Juju, hates to run out of disk. So you want to definitely watch that as an important indicator of what's going on. Grafana can be used to set alerts up on different, different amounts or whatnot. So I can go into here and edit this dashboard and say that I'd like to create an alert and evaluate it every 60 seconds when the average is above, here, let's say is below, because this is how much memory is free. Let's say, let's see, what is this in? This is in bytes. So let's say, when I get down to 100 megs of memory or whatnot, I want to set an alarm off, and I can kind of keep that, and you can test it and so on. So it's kind of useful. I actually did this because I'm working. I've got a tool that will stress Juju, where you can deploy a bundle over and over and over again, and kind of bang on Juju by repeatedly adding models, deploying stuff, destroying it over and over. So I've got a script that does this, and in there I kind of put this Prometheus config, and I've got the links to this from the show notes. This is kind of a copy and paste example of how to recreate this. This definitely demonstrates how in Juju it'd be really good to be able to say, we've talked about how we want to make controllers show up as if they were applications in the model. I want to put this on the controllers. I want to relate this to the controller. You have to edit an IP address of the controller nodes in a couple of places in this configuration and setup in order to get this going. But what I want to kind of show and demonstrate to people is that here I'm almost purely using Juju, the charms we have, in order to set up kind of monitoring and watching of the controllers that I'm going to run in production. I'm going to rely on to keep my production infrastructure up and running well. So I'm going to write up an email to the list on a blog post to kind of go through this step by step with some screenshots of what goes where when. But I encourage folks to try this out. And if you're running Juju in production, give it a look. There's still some work to be done. Some next steps from here is when you have HA controllers, it's a little bit of a pain because you have to deploy Ubuntu onto the controller first and then relate Telegraph to it, the subordinate, so you can start tracking the new controller machines. And there's the Giraph. The dashboard's really cool. but it gets busy as you add multiple controllers. So there's the option to have kind of a dashboard per controller machine you could go through and do. I really want to try to have a single pane of glass if you're going to say this is whether or not stuff's running well or not. I would rather have one thing to look at than three. So there's probably some ways to make the dashboard better. Maybe some Grafana experts out there want to give me some hints and tips on better ways of laying out the dashboard. But we ship with the dashboard in here, so you can see later on down here, it goes through and how to set up the data source. And then you can import this controller dashboard.json, which is included here in GitHub. So everything, the sample configuration file, sample dashboard, it's all there, ready to go. You just basically have to update a couple of IP addresses and a couple of password fields. And there you go. You too can watch your production Juju there.
Was your memory usage and the sum?
No, it was how much was left on each machine. I was trying to think of if you do how much you're using. The problem is the machines can have different amounts of memory.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no clear indication when is it coming to a problem point, right? So I said, well, how much memory is free, such that when that gets down and hits closer to 0, then you know, oh crap, I'm running out of memory, regardless of if the machine has 32 gigs or 16 gigs or 8 gigs, right?
Yeah, free.
0 is a single point of badness, whereas if you're going up, and it's a little confusing. I at first did it forward until I did a deploy on MAAS, and some of my nodes have 16 gigs of RAM and some have 8. And I got 3 controllers with different amounts of RAM, and I realized the numbers made no sense.
Gotcha.
Like it wasn't helpful, right?
And I was asking as far as, you had multiple controllers, so multiple machines there, right? And your Grafana dashboard, or was that just one machine?
That was 3 machines in that dashboard. So here,
So are you showing the number of some free for the aggregate sum of those 3?
No. Each one had its own line.
Oh, did it? Okay.
Let me go back. I'll pull it back up just to clarify here.
Right on.
So,
Awesome.
So this memory free here, you can see a yellow line, a blue line, and a green line. And the green line is controller machine 0.
Oh, gotcha.
And the blue and yellow are 1 and 2.
3 controllers.
Yeah. So
Okay.
3 controllers, and if I added a fourth line would show up, and you can kind of watch them independently.
Yeah.
And then just for folks that, this is what it looks like in the GUI on there. This is what's running here. Grafana's over here kind of configured. Here's Telegraph wired into the Ubuntu Charm, which is on 2 of the controllers, and the Prometheus Charm on the original controller. And so ideally in production, I would actually move Prometheus and such off of the controller nodes so that my tracking of the data and aggregating it wasn't tied to the machines that I'm actually watching, right? But this was me playing around with some density stuff and trying to get it working.
Cool.
Calling back to earlier in the show, as I mentioned, Prometheus is installed via Snap, which was really cool, except for the bug that I hit with the current Snapd that's out there right now. So it can be, it could be put into a container on a machine once the next Snapd release comes out. So keep an eye on that. And if you hit an issue there, let me know.
I have a question, Rick. Do we know if we can use a single Grafana dashboard for multiple Prometheus backends?
Totally. The Grafana can be set up with multiple data sources, and when you add a dashboard, you can point it to which data source the dashboard points to. What I don't know is if a single dashboard can point to multiple data sources.
Okay, so it's reasonable to expect that we could have a dashboard for both our Juju controller and, say, for instance, our CDK metrics that we're getting exported from that as well.
Totally. Yes. I would even encourage, you want one place for all your, just like you would want like one, of course I'm blanking, one Nagios to watch for your traffic lights. You really want to have kind of one source of this is where all of our data gets aggregated to, so you can watch it all. And what you could do is there's a little drop down in the top that lets you quickly switch between different dashboards that you've set up. So what you would just do is have different dashboards and just toggle between them with the drop down in the header of Grafana.
Super cool. Thanks, man.
Awesome. And if you're doing something else, if you're monitoring or watching your Juju controllers in some other way, or in particular, this dashboard's my first pass at what I think is important and interesting. The one thing I'm missing, I'd like to get some Mongo-related data pulled out and into here. There's a Mongo Prometheus thing that was having some hard times getting running. That's why there's some empty space in the dashboard where I was reserving. I'm going to put up a couple of Mongo charts here. But if there's anything that you find is particularly useful to track on controllers, it's a good sign of health versus not, let me know, and I can go in and bake it into the default dashboard so that everyone, when they get started and copy these instructions and stuff and kind of walk through it, they get that same, the most important stuff, we want to kind of take an opinionated approach on what's good defaults. Alrighty, that's all I've got to show for this week. Anyone have anything else before we go? Awesome.
I've got an Elasticsearch 5.0 in the review queue. If anyone wants to take a stab at reviewing it.
Definitely, Elasticsearch is awesome. I know we use it in a lot of places, so that will be very cool to see. 5.0, any new fancy stuff in 5.0 we should make sure we go use?
We just completed the upgrade to in a few of our apps. It was a pretty slightly hefty overhaul just because we're manually interacting with it outside of like the libraries, right? So but everything seems to be going pretty smooth, and yeah, it's basically just a slight upgrade and modification to the pre-existing Elasticsearch charm to make it support 5.0.
Cool.
But that's all I've got.
All right, looks like we got one question hitting an IRC as far as an ETA on 2.1.2, and I don't have an answer for that. Unfortunately, post-sprint from last week, I have not gotten all caught up on where we are with the release schedule. So I apologize on that one. I feel like it's something I should know. So all right, so I'll apologize on that, and then we'll head on out of here. Everyone, thanks for coming and stopping by, and we'll see you all maybe even next week. We'll have to see. Talk to you later.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.